So now that the big, beautiful bill has been passed and signed into law by the president, and it goes into effect at a time that we know what it does and the language inside is locked, we can finally talk about what it means. We talked about this weeks and weeks and weeks ago, and thanks to you guys, there was an incredible push to get some really good anti-NFA language into the bill. Not all of it stuck, some of it did. We're going to talk about exactly what that means. So there's three things that I want to cover in this conversation. The first is the immediate practical applications of what this means for you, that there's now a $0 charge for a suppressor. You still have to get a tax stamp with the registration, the fingerprints, all the NFA stuff, but that tax stamp now costs you $0, and that goes into effect January 1st of 2026. What does that mean? Then we're also going to talk about politically what happened, both visibly and sort of behind the scenes in the next steps. And then I also want to talk about what we do in the future to finish off the NFA and how realistic that might be. So first of all, suppressors. You would like to buy a suppressor with no NFA paperwork, and we came very, very close to that. But the only thing that we actually ended up with is no $200 tax stamp. So what's going to happen? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is people who were planning to buy a suppressor will probably wait until January 1st to order it so they can get it without that $200 tax stamp. So for you, maybe nothing changes immediately because you're waiting until January. I think some of the suppressor manufacturers that have a little more margin will start to run $200 off sales as they move through this kind of quieter time as everybody's waiting to do stuff. And then on January 1st, everybody's going to file the paperwork and the ATF is going to slow way down. Right now, e-file processing is quite fast. In fact, I talked to the person who runs that at the ATF at the last SHOT Show, and she was saying that their record at the time, last January, was over 9,000, she did not get the joke, over 9,000 e-files being processed in a single day by her team in Martinsburg, West Virginia. I anticipate that this coming January, they're going to get way more e-files than that, and they're not going to be able to keep up. So wait times are probably going to be increasing again. The other thing that's going to happen, I hope, a number of different manufacturers are going to be working on this, but they're going to be working on cheaper suppressors. In the past, and we've talked about this many times, the wait times and the $200 tax stamp has meant that people are interested in suppressors that are premium materials. But there's no reason that cheaper suppressors couldn't exist with less regulation. Things like disposable wipe cans that are very simple, very affordable. These are things that the market should be tinkering with right now in hopes that something changes later. Because now that we have the big, beautiful bill passed, we also have a big, beautiful lawsuit or two. GOA, Firearm Policy Coalition, Palmetto State Armory, a bunch of people have filed a couple of different lawsuits against the federal government because it is ridiculous to have a whole registration scheme and a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence for violating a $0 tax. There's no constitutional reason for this to exist. It's also cruel and unusual punishment. There's all kinds of ways to attack the NFA now that the tax has been reduced to zero. So there's a possibility, and this all depends on the courts and the judges and timing and things like that, that we will actually see significant weakening or removal of parts of the NFA sooner than we thought. Well, no, because we actually hoped it was going to happen now. We actually hoped this was going to end up inside of the bill. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about what happened. And what happened was very encouraging to me. And I realized that we did not get what we wanted in the bill. Some of you were very discouraged about that. I am discouraged about that. But I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we just saw a very crippling blow to the NFA. This is the first time that the NFA has suffered a significant challenge or diminution, unless you count back in the 50s when they shortened the minimum short barrel rifle distance from 18 inches down to 16. Last time there was any change to the NFA, it was just 2 inches of barrel length getting trimmed off. Now we've gotten hundreds of dollars of the actual tax stamp trimmed off. This is a massive cultural shift, even though we didn't get the complete victory that we were hoping for. The fascinating thing, though, is that we came really close. This is the first serious attack on the NFA, and we got very close to getting it in. We had early on in the House bill a complete removal of the suppressor portion of the NFA. And then when the bill went to the Senate, we actually had in the Senate, thanks to pressure from guys like you, people added text to the bill that completely removed the short-barreled rifle selection as well. I did not actually expect that to be improved in the Senate, but I did want to see that happen, and we did see that happen. The only reason that it didn't pass is because the Senate parliamentarian ruled, incorrectly I would like to point out, that a budget bill that addresses only financial issues cannot remove gun regulations and gun bans. Now, the reason that I say that she is wrong is because in 1934, when they passed the NFA, the only reason that the Supreme Court actually let it stand as a non-violation of the Second Amendment is because it was not a regulatory ban at all. It was merely a tax statute. A tax statute can totally be changed inside of a budget bill. So they should have pushed this thing through and ignored the Senate parliamentarian, and the reason that they didn't was politics. And the politics are dirty and unpleasant as always. Now, some of you have mentioned on the internet that you're never voting GOP again. And I would say, good. You never should have been voting GOP in the first place. You should have been voting specifically for principled men who are going to do the right thing. And it's because of some of those very few principled guys that are in there that we got the good language in the bill in the first place. The cultural movement from the gun community is what has made this thing possible in the first place. And we need more of that, not just big GOP and big DNC sides butting heads over things, and then giving up and letting the unelected bureaucrats like the Senate parliamentarians make the final call. And now we run into kind of an interesting political issue where we have this small win on the paperwork that goes with the tax stamps, and then we have the opportunity to fight a court battle over this stuff, but we also have the midterms coming up. Not only is the big, beautiful tax bill a disappointment when it comes to us not getting everything we wanted with the NFA, it's a disappointment across a bunch of things. It is a giant omnibus bill that is full of stuff. It's full of compromises that both sides kind of hate. So there are budget cuts that real conservatives like, but not nearly enough to put a dent into our deficit. And then the budget cuts are things that Democrats care about, so they don't like the bill either. And then there is a massive raise of the debt ceiling, which true conservatives would not like, but it's not enough to satisfy people on the left. So it's one of these compromises that everybody hates, which is an issue because we're going into the midterms now. Because there's not a really strong win on the NFA stuff, on Second Amendment stuff, because there's not a really strong win on some of the issues that people have campaigned on in the past, even President Trump has campaigned on in the past, there's a lot of people that don't have any wins to really campaign on in this upcoming midterm. There's a bunch of people that just have this very generic sort of big, beautiful bill omnibus win, and that's just not exciting to people. Even the good stuff that's in the bill, there are some tax things that are good. There's an R&D tax that I think is really good for manufacturing and innovation in the United States, but nobody's excited about that, and you can't campaign on that and actually expect to hold your seat in the midterms. There's going to be a whole bunch of Republicans that get primaried in this upcoming primary, and then there's probably some people who are going to lose their seats to the Democrats. So this is an opportunity for us to demand that our representatives prove their Second Amendment bona fides, their actual conservative principles, with some much more serious legislation in the next session, and I hope to see that. This is also an opportunity for us to find people who can primary some of the guys who are squishy and move them out. And the principle is you don't vote for people with an R in front of their name. You vote for people who have the correct principles and will actually stand up for what is right and for the Constitution. We have a couple of those guys in there now, and it's how we got so much good language into these bills before it got kind of scuppered. But again, I want to encourage you guys. This is the first time we've seen any kind of win on an NFA issue at all. It is not complete. It is not good. And if you guys don't want to get a free tax stamp for a suppressor because it puts you inside of the system, I think that's a great principled stand that I could stand behind as well. And if you want to clog up the ATF by making a whole bunch of Form 1 cans, that is a principled stand that I think has some practical value as well. So there's all kinds of interesting opportunities on the practical front. There's all kinds of interesting opportunities on the political front. We got very, very close, and I don't want the disappointment of that failure to complete this particular campaign to cause us to write off the next steps that need to be taken. So let's pay very close attention to what is going on and look forward to the next steps in this battle on the legislative front, on the the campaign and election front, and then of course on that judicial front as well. The guys fighting this in the courts in the next few months. I am really hopeful, you guys. Depending on what wait times actually end up being with the ATF early next year, there's all kinds of opportunity to experiment with stuff. We've done videos about it in the past, but I anticipate there'll be a lot of baffle-based and really simple monocore suppressors. I think we'll see a whole bunch of home-built suppressors now that the tax stamp is out of the way. A whole bunch of square send, cut, send suppressor plans are going to be popping up on the internet very soon. A lot of stuff that people have tinkered with in the past, we'll probably get to experiment with more. And then again, I feel like this is, on the one hand, it is a defeat, but on the other hand, we took a lot of ground here. We took a big step forward, and then there's other steps forward that we can take for other NFA things that we can work on in the meantime, right now.